Hello and welcome to the news at 10. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Tonight, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Boss Mustapha, advocates restructuring of health systems in Nigeria and across Africa, says current health crisis calls for urgent action by political leaders. Enugu State records its first COVID-19 death as state confirms 3 new cases, 2 of them with severe underlying conditions. Nigeria confiscates $57 million private jet believed to be owned by former Minister of Petroleum Dan Etete after tracking it to Canada. And Black Lives Matter protesters defy COVID-19 warnings as large crowds continue protests against racism and police in the U.S. states of Washington and other places. Plus, business and sports.
On business news tonight, OPEC and OPEC Plus sealed deal on 1-month extension of 9.7 million barrels a day output cut as Nigeria and Iraq agree to compensate for missing output quota in May and June.
And on sports news tonight, world boxing heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua brands racism a virus in his support for the Black Lives Matter movement protest march in the United Kingdom.
Thank you for joining us. The outbreak of the coronavirus has exposed the weak health and governance structures in countries around the world, but the situation amongst African countries is compounded because of the lack of data. This according to the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Mr. Boss Mustapha, who believes that COVID-19 presents an opportunity for African leaders to restructure their health systems and prepare for future public health emergencies. Mr. Mustapha, who is also the secretary to the government of the Federation, was speaking today after leading a team of the task force to inspect the National Reference Laboratory of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control in Abuja.
The unfortunate thing about the COVID-19 virus is it's novel. We've never had the experience, but it has demonstrated one thing, that it has exposed the weaknesses in all systems across the world in terms of health response, in terms of social inclusivity, providing for the vulnerable and the poor, in terms of even our governance structure. That is what COVID-19 has done. It has demonstrated its efficacy, it has demonstrated how virulent and dangerous it is, that it is challenging even our nuances of democracy as to whether the governor can make a certain declaration where you find state governors, a president can make a certain declarations where you find a governor challenging that declaration, and even a mayor of a city saying that you can't go beyond this boundary. These are democracies that have existed for over 2 centuries. But COVID-19 has exposed the weaknesses even in our governance structure. Don't talk about Africa, where we do not have any structure of inclusivity that would have catered for these people. We don't have data in terms of demography, in terms of where these people stay. So there's so many things that after COVID, post-COVID-19, that we cannot continue to run our systems the same way again. If we do that, then posterity will not be fair in its judgment of us. At least let's maximize the experiences of COVID-19 to ensure that our health infrastructure will not remain the same again.
Meanwhile, Enugu State in southeast Nigeria has recorded its first death from COVID-19. The patient, who had been receiving treatment at the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital, was reported to have had severe underlying conditions and died before the results came out. Meanwhile, 3 more patients have been discharged from the isolation and treatment centers after testing negative for the virus, while the State Ministry of Health confirmed 3 new cases of the disease, all with travel history. 2 of the new cases are male patients admitted with other severe underlying conditions, and are being treated at the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital, Enugu. The other case is also a male patient who developed symptoms and contracted the state COVID-19 response team. The result of his sample test came out positive today. And while Lagos remains the epicenter of COVID-19 in Nigeria, the state has continued to record more success in the treatment of the disease. 42 patients who have fully recovered from COVID-19 in Lagos have been discharged from 3 isolation centers in the state. Amongst them are 11 female and 31 male. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who announced this today, says 20 of the patients were discharged from the Bagada Isolation Center, 11 were discharged from Etiosa, and another 11 from Lekki Isolation Center. This brings to 994 the total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases that have been successfully managed and discharged in Lagos. In neighboring Ogun State, the Ogun State government says it's sustaining the current ease of lockdown from Monday through Friday, with a total lockdown on Saturday and Sunday of each week. Governor Dapo Abiodun made the announcement during his weekly briefing on the COVID-19 pandemic in Abeokuta, the state capital. To make this easier, a committee which comprises of government officials and religious leaders has been set up by the state government to look at modalities of possible reopening of religious gatherings in the state on the 19th of this month.
We should be able to tentatively commence the relaxation on religious gatherings by Friday, the 19th of June 2020. A task force comprising of the religious leaders, government and security agencies will be established to monitor and ensure compliance with the agreed guidelines for religious activities. Any place of worship that violates these guidelines will be closed. The guidelines will be reviewed at regular intervals based on developments including expert opinions and data from the field. Government will continue the engagement as well as intensify enlightenment and education of the public on the various guidelines to combat the pandemic in the state.
Meanwhile, healthcare workers in Edo State have been commended for their role in the fight to contain the spread of coronavirus, even as they account for 16% of the current positive cases in the country. This commendation is coming from Governor Godwin Obaseki, who made it known during a state broadcast where he also appealed to them not to be deterred by the number of their colleagues infected with the virus. He urges them to believe in the state government's ability to take their welfare seriously.
Today, I ask all Edo citizens to join me to express our gratitude and appreciation to our healthcare workers who have been leading a fight against COVID-19. These gallant men and women continuously sacrifice almost everything: their health, friends and families, livelihoods and resources, just to make sure that we are safe. We thank you for your sacrifices and want you to know that we are extremely grateful and very proud of your commitments and efforts. I implore you not to be discouraged, because over 16% of our current COVID-19 cases are healthcare workers. I know this may dampen your morale and demotivate you, but be rest assured that my government will not relent in prioritizing your welfare and continue to ensure that you have adequate training, access to the right equipment, facilities, and proper compensation. The resilience of our healthcare system is being tested by this pandemic, but we are hopeful that with the dedication of health workers like you, we shall overcome.
Survivors of the coronavirus pandemic in Delta State have been telling their stories on how they battled the virus for several weeks before recovering fully. Two of them, Austin Eroto, the state's index case, and Jerry Azinge, the fourth case, affirm that the virus truly exists and spoke of how they fought to overcome it. The index case was also decorated as a COVID-19 campaign ambassador for Delta State.
COVID-19 is real, but how has this reality sunk into the minds of the people of Delta State? In many cases, doubting the existence of the virus and late presentation of cases has led to the loss of lives which could have been prevented. But in this hall at the Government House in Asaba, These survivors tell their stories.
I was under oxygen for 4 or 5 days. At the point when I want to go and ease myself, when I take off the oxygen, something will be telling me that you will slump when you get to the washroom, because I was really afraid I could not breathe proper. It takes me within, the distance is from here to the doorstep before you see toilet. So I will now run fast to ease myself, within 1 hour to use the washroom, within 1 minute to use the washroom and come back for me to use the oxygen.
I was in isolation at the Federal Medical Center for 18 or 19 days. I could not leave one room, could not leave my room. I had to adjust, waking up, saying my prayers, exercising from my window to my door, jogging 40 times to and fro in one room. I had never been confined in my life since I was born.
As the government continues to battle with the increasing number of cases, it is pleading with the residents to adhere to the measures in place.
Some of the cases actually are from persons who disobeyed certain regulations that the state government had brought forth, to restrict the movement of persons from place to place.
The curfew is still in place, and even though, going by what the Presidential Task Force said, they adjusted the time from 10 p.m. to 4 p.m. We've still maintained our original time of 7 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Getting the message of the existence of the virus to every nook and cranny of the state is priority for the government. The index case is decorated as a Delta State campaign ambassador against COVID-19 to help drive this message home.
With our coverage on the outbreak of COVID-19, its outbreak in Wuhan, China last year and its subsequent spread to other countries around the world speaks to the importance of planning ahead on how to better manage diseases outbreaks. And health experts say the challenge of managing disease is not necessarily planning, but implementation. Our report examines the role of planning and implementation in the effective management of disease outbreaks.
Over the years, health workers in Nigeria have battled several disease outbreaks, like the Ebola in 2014, as well as those outbreaks that have been described as seasonal, such as cholera, Lassa fever and meningitis. Some of these experiences have also made the Federal Minister of Health to develop several response plans for the effective management of public health emergencies. For instance, the Nigerian National Pandemic Preparedness and Response Plan of 2013 addresses issues as workforce development during a pandemic, isolation and quarantine, logistics management, acquisition of antiviral drugs, infection control measure, as well as fatalities management. However, the outbreak of COVID-19 in Nigeria has made some health experts to wonder if some of these documents are ever consulted during outbreaks.
Planning has never been something that we take very serious. We always have a way of making preparations, or we try to project and come up with policies and come up with plans and everything, but implementing that plan has always been the problem. Now, just like you mentioned, the disease management plan and everything of 2013, even the Ebola, and all these things have been put together based on the experiences that we had dealing with those diseases. And as we speak, nobody is even making reference to that plan. And it looks as if, we are faced with a disease condition that we don't even know how to manage. Just like every other document you have in Nigeria, Nigeria have a whole lot of policies. Nigeria has a whole lot of strategic plans on all different situations across board, health, education, and everything. But the problem has always been implementation.
Dr. Godwin Ntadom is a chief consultant epidemiologist at the Federal Ministry of Health. Like Dr. Ibrahim Kana, who is a public health physician, Ntadom insists that the resources expended for the development of these documents were never wasted.
The major thing that has been done is the knowledge that has been gathered through these experiences. Ebola came through Lagos. Some structures were put on ground. Some documents were developed which actually helped them to, to move ahead other states in the management of a pandemic of this nature.
Well, as a matter of fact, I can tell you for sure that in the last 6 to 7 years, from that 2012, 2013, particularly from 2013, government has been working with the US CDC here in Nigeria and established training for epidemiologists, what we call the Field Epidemiologist Training Program. It's a master's degree program. And that is what is actually helping our response in the coronavirus now, vis-a-vis our response during the Ebola, where we quickly activated these field epidemiologists at the state level to actually come together to serve as a network. That network is actually working. But I wouldn't disagree with you that perhaps the effectiveness of some states is suboptimal.
The outbreak of COVID-19 no doubt exposes the weakness of the Nigerian health system. Notwithstanding, however, it also presents the nation's health managers the opportunity to plan and implement new strategies for the effective management of disease outbreaks.
In part 2, after the break, we have more updates on COVID-19, plus troops raid Kachia Forest in Kaduna State, kill 70 bandits. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, live on Channels Television, Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Boss Mustapha, advocates restructuring of health systems in Nigeria and Africa, says current health crisis calls for urgent action by political leaders. Enugu State records its first COVID-19 death. Private jet believed to be owned by former Minister of Petroleum Dan Etete after tracking it to Canada is confiscated. And Black Lives Matter protesters defy COVID-19 warnings as large crowds continue protests against racism and police in the U.S. state of Washington and other places. Plus business and sports news. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Also, you can subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. When you get the Channels TV or Channels 24 apps, you can catch up with news updates on the go, plus the Eyewitness feature, designed for you to share pictures, videos, or news of happenings around you. Install the apps, then tap and swipe to reveal the menu and follow the instructions. Investigations into alleged corruption and money laundering against Nigeria's former Minister of Petroleum, Dan Etete, has taken a new turn with the tracking and grounding of a private jet which ownership is traced to the former minister. The jet is believed to have been purchased for $57 million in 2011 as part of the alleged proceeds of the $1.3 billion oil deal in which the prospecting rights to the OPL 245 block was awarded to a company, Malibu Oil and Gas, which he secretly controlled. Asset recovery lawyers acting for the federal government swooped after the Bombardier 6000 jets touched down at the Montreal Trudeau International Airport in Canada. The seizure was confirmed to our London correspondent by Babatunde Olabode Johnson, one of the lawyers involved in Nigeria's asset recovery cases. The order for the seizure, according to Mr. Johnson, was served on the jet's owner, a company called Tibet Limited, which has until Tuesday, June the 9th, to file court papers opposing the seizure. To security, 70 armed bandits terrorizing communities in parts of the northwest have been killed in Kachia Forest in Kaduna State. The coordinator of Defense Media Operations, Major General John Eneche, explained that the operation was carried out yesterday by a combined ground and air force offensive of troops of Operation Thunder Strike, as well as those of 3112 Artillery Regiment and local vigilantes. The troops were said to have pursued the bandits through Gidan Mekiri village in Chukun local government area into the forest, where they were engaged by Nigerian Air Force helicopter gunships. Meanwhile, 2 persons said to be the bandits' logistics suppliers have been arrested at the outskirts of Kankomi village, also in the state. The military has recently intensified its onslaught against armed bandits in the northwest, especially in Katsina, Zamfara, and Kaduna, following the order by President Muhammadu Buhari to fish out the gunmen and restore normalcy. Now, the controversy surrounding the attack on Itakwa community in Obi local government in Benue State is raging. One of the victims, who is a lawmaker representing the state constituency, is disputing the figure of 2 casualties reported by the police, insisting that 12 people were killed by armed herdsmen. Meanwhile, the state's deputy governor, Mr. Benson Abonu, who visited the affected community, has promised that no effort will be spared to bring the perpetrators to justice.
Officials of the Benue State government, led by the deputy governor, are in Itakwa community Obi local council to see the extent of damage following an attack on a community. Victims of the attack, mostly women and children, are now taking refuge. The deputy governor meets with the people and leaders of the community where he gets a brief about the crisis.
These people came in highly sophisticated weapon, killed 12 able bodies in Obi. It is our tradition and custom that when you are killed in the war, or when somebody comes to kill with a gun, we don't keep such bodies.
While calming frayed nerves, the deputy governor explains the state government's position on the matter and what it intends to do.
Already we have spread the dragnet, and wherever the people that caused this mayhem the day before yesterday are, the long arm of the government is going to catch up with them. The long arm of the law will catch up with them. Those who committed this crime will have to pay dearly for it.
One of the places visited is the home of a lawmaker, which was also reportedly attacked.
It's shocking, and I don't know how God help us. We escaped it, and they shot, nobody making any noise, we were just quiet. Maybe they thought we have run out of the house, and then they took my cows and left. 16 cows.
The Itakwa attack left casualties in its wake, with police and local authorities in disagreement over the number of deaths.
They killed them in their numbers. Precisely, there were 10 that were killed. One of them is an Idoma young man that was on his way. One of the persons also killed is the ward chairman of PDP ward chairman of Okpoko local government.
I've said it times with that number. We saw 2 corpses. The ones that we have not buried, we have not seen any buried corpse.
While the deputy governor assures the people of investigating the matter, he appeals to them not to take matters into their hands and allow the authorities to do their work.
Meanwhile, farmers and herders in Adamawa State have agreed to sheathe their swords and settle their disputes and live in peace with each other. This was the highlight of deliberations before the signing of a peace accord between the All Farmers Association and Tabital Polaku, a Fulani cultural group. This was made possible through the Managing Conflict in Nigeria under the British Council and European Union in Adamawa State.
The long-standing conflict between farmers and herders, often characterized by violence, loss of lives and properties, may be gradually coming to an end in Adamawa State. Members of the farming and herding communities in Goyuk local government area of southern Adamawa State, the Farmers Association of Nigeria, and other groups are gathered here to sign a peace accord initiated by the British Council. The leader of the group emphasizes the importance of the pact and dialogue for peaceful coexistence.
The MCN objectives for this project is basically to facilitate dialogue and mediation between herders and farmers in rural communities, and also to facilitate sensitization and proper understanding of the resources based on conflict and reduce tension among ethnic and religious groups.
We call on all communities around to emulate the initiative here supported by the Loboda Traditional Council.
There's a resolution among all parties, after which an agreement is signed between leaders of the farming and herding communities.
In the past, we had no regard for each other. Cattle entering farms caused disagreements between farmers and herders, and sometimes leads to loss of lives. In the last 2 years, because of this crisis, we witnessed a lot of losses. Thank God we now understand each other. We are sure that peaceful coexistence is the best that will bring prosperity and development.
This exercise is aimed at facilitating the promotion of reconciliation and stability in communities faced with conflicts in the Northeast region.
To gender-based violence and discussions on how to tackle cases of sexual assault have taken the front burner once more following the recent rise in cases. Legal experts are also weighing in on the issue, saying curbing gender-based violence requires the input of government, security agencies, and the citizens. They highlight the need for everyone to speak out against violent acts as the government ensures that security agencies carry out their duty to investigate and arrest perpetrators.
Public indignation against the alleged rape and killing of Ruwaila Omozua in a church in Benin City, the Edo State capital. The outcry is for an end to rape and gender violence. As to whether there is more to do, this legal practitioner has this to say.
We need to hold our security agencies accountable. They have a lot of work to do. You know, we can't continue like this. It's been like one event, another occurrence, one from Balugu, one happening at Ikeja, the other one in Benin, one at Uselu. Every now and then we hear stories like this. Most sincerely, our governments need to do what they need to do by equipping the security agencies, most importantly, making them to do the job they are paid to do.
For the Edo State government, the fight against gender violence has been on and continues strongly.
The government of His Excellency Mr. Godwin Obaseki is working tirelessly to ensure that appropriate measures are put in place to ensure that victims can find safety and the information that they need to seek redress, and also to ensure that perpetrators are tried, convicted, and punished.
These steps, however, do not preclude individuals from taking bold action, from speaking out against gender violence and reporting cases when they occur, to discouraging victim stigmatization. Jessica Lubuse, Channels Television News.
When the news at 10 returns, more on gender-based violence in Ekiti State, and OPEC and OPEC Plus deal on 1 month extension of 9.7 million barrels per day output cuts as Nigeria and Iraq agree to compensate for missing output quota in May and June. That's on Business News. Do join us again. Welcome back. Concerned about the disturbing trend of sexual violence, the Ekiti State Governor, Kayode Fayemi, has signed a new bill known as the Sexual Violence Against Children Compulsory Treatment and Care 2020 Act into law. The law makes treatment and care compulsory for child victims of such abuse. Governor Fayemi notes that the rising cases of sexual assault in the state calls for legal review to prioritize the interest and welfare of victims. He also wants effective prosecution of sex offenders, calling for a national consensus on rape. Now to a story related to COVID-19. The Ooni of Ife has donated 2 motorized modular fumigators to Ebonyi State government to support the efforts made to control the spread of coronavirus in the state. The State House of Assembly Speaker, while receiving the Ooni COVID-19 team on behalf of the state, announced the donation. He also applauded the gesture, promising that this will help in the fight against the spread of coronavirus in Ebonyi State.
everything in here is locally sourced and is fabricated right behind the palace. And they came up with the idea, was brilliant. Within 1 week, this fumigator came to existence. And Kabiyesi said, no, we must donate it to each state because we are one Nigeria, and he believes in one Nigeria. So that's why we're doing this exercise. He has traveled with us to donate to the southwest, and now we are helping out to make sure that we bring this back to Ebonyi, to other states in the southeast and south-south.
Just to use it effectively and make use of it effectively for the benefit of Ebonyi people. That's, is going to happen. We have the automatic one. This is locally made, and we're very grateful because with this, we can be able to use our hand to produce more.
Also concerning COVID-19, the number of active internet subscriptions in Nigeria has grown from 123.6 million in November 2019 to over 136.2 million as at March 2020, according to the Nigeria Communications Commission. The new subscribers are mostly individuals who've gone virtual after the lockdown to curb the spread of COVID-19. Our correspondent, Ini John Mekwa, explores the reality of online operations as well as their consequences.
Home and business have become one for Dogba Adeniyi since the enforcement of restriction on business operations as a means of limiting the spread of COVID-19 began. Being a food vendor, she's allowed to work, but her means of communicating with her customers has slightly changed, but not in the negative.
People started to order for food for their spouses, for their moms, for their dads. Basically, they send us either via DM on Instagram or via the Booker app.
Okay, I just saw your order, thank you. We'll get it ready for you.
Going virtual also comes through phone calls. That is where the bulk of orders come from many food vendors, as well as Victoria Mbogo, whose kitchen is now a food factory of some sort.
The only problem I had was getting raw materials. It got that bad that I had to pay escorts to go with my driver to get stuff at Mile 12.
Trading in food is not the only thriving business. School owners are finding ways to stay active. Classrooms are now virtual. Joy Subosu leads the team here and says this is likely to continue even when normal school activities resume.
Everybody operates from their home, you understand? So there's a particular amount we give to our staff weekly for this to happen. So definitely, it's actually increased our costs.
These are some of the individuals who have contributed to the increase in the number of active internet subscriptions by technology in Nigeria from 123.6 million in October 2019 to over 136.2 million as at March 2020, according to the Nigerian Communications Commission. The figures are likely to increase further as government encourages more businesses to go virtual.
What I'm thinking of is a situation whereby we limit the numbers of people per each section that will be trained, and we equally involve them in this IT knowledge, even from, if it's not part of the concept before, we're asking them to include it in the concept right now.
Because online or digital has become the primary service channel.
But as the good grows, so also the not good. Figures from KPMG, a global network of professional firms, shows that there's been 80% increase in distributed denial of service attacks, which are aimed at disrupting businesses since the first quarter of 2020. 1.2 million registered COVID-19 themed domains, 30% increase in impersonation activities and other cyber threats.
A lot of the cyber attacks are really things that people could prevent. Someone sends an email to you and says, give me your password and your PIN number. If you are aware that there can be an attack resulting from this, you will not provide it.
This is another area which the federal government's campaign on taking responsibility becomes relevant, as it becomes imperative to gain knowledge for private and business protection. Ini John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
To the power sector, the acting managing director of the Transmission Company of Nigeria, Mr. Sule Abdulaziz, is pledging to work with the National Assembly to strengthen the transmission capacity of the nation's electricity sector. The TCN boss gave the assurance during the oversight visit by members of the House of Representatives Committee on Power to the headquarters of the company in Abuja. He says his immediate focus is replace and repair existing equipment in the nation's transmission network.
In order to drive growth in capacity utilization, the immediate focus of the new TCN management will be on replacing or repairing existing equipment which are failing and prone to breakdowns. Regular, proactive maintenance processes will be institutionalized to reduce the occurrence and impact of breakdowns. We are also going to prioritize and expanding our capacity by new projects that will span across the entire nation. These are some of the considerations that will help in achieving the goal in improving the performance of the transmission sector. Similar approaches have been undertaken by other developing countries which Nigeria can borrow from. I will therefore at this juncture thank the honorable members for their visit, while craving your indulgence as I allow my other management team to present the activities of the different sectors in TCN.
One person has been confirmed dead and 15 others seriously injured in an accident which occurred at the Polo roundabout area of Jos in Plateau State, central Nigeria. According to eyewitness accounts, a petrol-laden tanker lost control, resulting in the vehicle crushing other vehicles and tricycles at the roundabout and eventually crashing into a church. A member of the Nigerian Red Cross said those injured were taken to the Bingham Teaching Hospital in Jos. And now for business news with Teniola Shobowale.
Thanks, Olumide. Welcome to Business News. OPEC, Russia and its OPEC Plus allies have agreed to a one-month extension of record output cuts and also adopted a more rigid approach to ensuring members don't break their production pledges. The groups during the 179th meeting of the OPEC conference and the 11th OPEC and non-OPEC ministerial meeting today says they will maintain the May-June production cut of 9.7 million barrels a day till July, instead of easing it to 7.7 million after this month as planned. It also states that any member that doesn't implement 100% of its production cuts in May and June will make extra reductions from July to September to compensate for their failings. Meanwhile, Minister of State Petroleum Resources, Timipre Silva, says the federal government is ready to make additional oil output cuts from July to September to compensate for producing more than its quota in May and June. Silva, in a statement, adds that the country subscribes to the concept of compensation by countries who are unable to attain full conformity in May and June to accommodate it in July, August and September. OPEC, Russia and other allies are in talks on extending record oil production cuts that have doubled oil prices since April, and also to push countries such as Iraq and Nigeria to deliver better compliance with the curbs. Now, the central bank has been the regulator to watch for business survival since the outbreak of COVID-19 in the country. In realization of this expectation, the bank has released intervention funds as buffers for likely economic shocks that could arise from the pandemic. The disbursement of the fund has, however, been questioned by the public. But in this report, Channels TV business correspondent Temple Ashaju examines how much has been dispersed and who the beneficiaries are.
On March the 9th and 16th, when the central bank announced some economic stimulus measures to cushion the effects of COVID-19 on the economy, it sounded like music to the ears.
Any intervention loan
The interventions include a 100 billion naira fund in healthcare loans to pharmaceutical companies, another 50 billion naira COVID-19 target credit facility for households and SMEs, plus a trillion naira in loans for local manufacturing and production across critical sectors, among others. In an interview with Channels TV on May the 19th, 2020, the CBN confirmed readiness to boost disbursal.
A lot of businesses are running out of cash, and you will see us respond this week. We've been working with the NMFP and a couple of other providers to see how we can utilize technology properly to, one, front-load a lot of the activities.
A week later, CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele reeled out the numbers of beneficiaries at a media briefing.
Under the 100 billion healthcare sector intervention fund, the bank has approved and disbursed 10.15 billion. The bank has also approved 10.9 billion to 14,331 beneficiaries under the 50 billion naira targeted credit facility for households and small and medium enterprises, out of which 4.1 billion naira has been disbursed to 5,868 successful beneficiaries.
And now we took to the streets to confirm the reality of disbursements amongst the few companies, and some companies confirmed to us that they are already in receipt of the funds, but they will rather be confidential with such information due to some of the disclosure clauses in their company's rule books. Enugu-based Juhel Pharmaceutical Company is one of the key beneficiaries of the healthcare fund, while cooking gas merchant Adejo Negadu is a recipient of the Target Credit Facility for SMEs.
We applied and we have received the money. And we're already working with the money. And the essence of the money is to expand our factory, be able to manufacture most drugs in Nigeria.
I applied without knowing anyone, and I was granted after signing the agreement, which was the collateral, and I accessed the money within 48 hours.
But there are also those who are yet to benefit from the funds.
Well, Nimet International Pharmaceuticals PLC has applied, and up to last week, we're aware that it was being processed.
I've applied, I've been given offer letter, but yet there is no disbursement. CBN has not done any disbursement for some certain categories of pharma.
With about 10 months to the closure of the 5% interest rate repayment window, the CBN remains keen about disbursement, leaving the public wondering what percentage of the 41.5 million MSMEs is being targeted. Temple Ashaju, Channels Television News.
Now, the nomination of former Minister of Finance Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as Nigeria's candidate for the Director General of the World Trade Organization has suffered a setback as the Egyptian government is kicked against her candidature. President Muhammadu Buhari selected Okonjo-Iweala over Yonof Aga, Nigeria's permanent representative to WTO, for the WTO, for the same position ahead of the scheduled 2021 election in Switzerland. The Egyptian government, in a memo to the permanent missions of the WTO member states of the Ministerial Committee on Candidatures, says the decision to withdraw Mr. Aga's candidature means Nigeria forfeited its chance to participate in the race. Now, negative sentiments takes precedence in the domestic markets in the first trading week of June as the all-share index declined by 1.0% week-on-week, owing to profit-taking on bar cement, Nigerian breweries and some banking stocks, which weighed in on the overall performance. Investors maintained their appetite on stocks in banking, consumer goods and services sector, while the oil and gas sector fell by minus 1.35% due to some profit-taking. Nimet Pharmaceutical tops a list of gainers for the week with 56.64% increase in its share price. Afromedia leads other losers after a 23.08% price drop. Total value of shares traded for the week was higher at 1.469 billion naira in 22,911 transactions, in contrast to 1.25 billion shares traded last week, while Tier 1 lenders FBN Holdings, GT Bank and Zenith are top on the trades list. And that's Business News tonight. It's back to you, Olumide.
Thank you, Taniola. Still ahead on the news at 10. World Boxing Heavyweight Champion Anthony Joshua brands racism a virus as he throws his weight behind the Black Lives Matter movement protests in the UK. And more on the Black Lives Matter protests in the U.S. state of Washington and other places. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the news at 10. Boxing champion Anthony Joshua says no to racism. That's on Sports News. Here's Kayode Alayande.
Anthony Joshua has shown his support for the Black Lives Matter movement by attending a protest march in his hometown. The WBA, WBO and IBF World Heavyweight Champion took to the streets of Watford today to campaign following the controversial death of African-American George Floyd on May the 25th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The Nigerian-born heavyweight boxer used a scooter and crutches to attend the rally as he recovers from a knee injury sustained in training.
A virus that is not apologetic, a virus that spreads across all sectors of our communities, sports, education, churches, entertainment, the media, and even the government, not just in the UK, but across the world. The virus has been declared a pandemic. It is out of control. And I'm not actually talking about COVID-19. The virus I'm referring to is called racism. How long are we going to allow racism to spread through our communities, and right now we are in the community, and affect our lives without using the vaccine you already have in your possession? What is the possession? Me and you. You are the vaccine. I am the vaccine. We need to speak out in peaceful demonstrations, just like today, so well done, Watford. Inject the vaccine. We must not use a demonstration for selfish motives and turn it into rioting and looting.
Compelling speech there by Anthony Joshua. Meanwhile, Super Falcons midfielder Ngozi Okubi-Okegene has faulted the frequent changes in the coaching crew of the team. The African champions are still without a substantive coach since the exit of Swedish Thomas Dernaby in 2019. And Bayern Munich have taken another step towards an 8th successive German Bundesliga table after coming from behind to win 4-2 away to Bayern Leverkusen. The victory extends the Bavarians' winning run to 9 games and putting them 7 points clear at the top of the table. The Borussia Dortmund kept alive their fading hopes of wresting the title from Bayern Munich's grasp after a second-half goal from Emre Can gave them a 1-0 home win over Hertha Berlin. FSV Mainz 05 scored once in each half to beat Eintracht Frankfurt 2-0 and move 3 points from the relegation playoff spot. Christian Strodek scored a dramatic injury time equalizer for the bottom side, Paderborn, to deny RB Leipzig all 3 points. And that will be all on Sports News. Back to you, Lumide.
Thank you, Kayode. On the foreign scene, large crowds have gathered to protest against racism and police brutality in Washington, D.C. amidst rising anger sparked by the death of George Floyd. There have been protests across the U.S. for 2 weeks now. But Washington's police chief believes today's demonstration may be one of the largest the city has ever seen. The death of Floyd, an unarmed African-American man in Minnesota, has also brought tens of thousands out onto the streets around the world to call for justice.
Chanting Black Lives Matter, taking a knee, and ignoring social distancing measures. Outraged protesters from Sydney to London kick off global rallies against racism and police brutality. Thousands of Australians defied Prime Minister Scott Morrison's call to find a better way to voice their anger. And thousands more in the United Kingdom ignored the health minister's warning that the coronavirus remains a real threat.
I guess I'm here because I don't think there's anywhere more important to be today, and because I want to stand in solidarity with all the BAME people in London, in the UK and around the world, and I want to let them know that they're not alone and that we're here in solidarity with them.
Similar demonstrations also took place in Germany, France, South Korea and Japan. And in the United States, for the 12th consecutive day, large crowds gathered across the country calling for justice for George Floyd. In Washington, singing "Lean on Me," protesters of different color marched towards the White House and other landmarks.
We all need somebody to lean on.
No, this is definitely not the end. This is just only what you see happening today in the past 2 weeks is pressure, applied pressure, and it's no time to let up. We must continue to press and allow our voices to be heard.
George Floyd, an unarmed black man, died after being arrested outside a shop. Video footage showed a white police officer, Derek Chauvin, kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes. Chauvin has been dismissed and charged with murder. 3 other officers who were on the scene have also been sacked and charged with aiding and abetting.
And the main news again, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Boss Mustafa, today added his voice to the call for a restructuring of the health system in Nigeria and other African countries. That's it on the news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay.